Hello and welcome to Foreign Dispatches, the program that takes you around the world in 25 minutes. I'm Tenyola Shoboale. On the program this week, it's a much welcomed end of Zoom diplomacy as world leaders meet face-to-face to discuss issues from security to climate change. The yearly meeting of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO members, wrapped up this week in Brussels amid a busy week of multilateral events that also included the G7 summit in England. This year was the first in which both NATO and the G7 singled out China as a security risk. It's a diplomatic victory for U.S. President Joe Biden, who urged his fellow leaders to stand up to China's growing military strength.
Every year, the leaders of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization's 30-member countries meet for a summit. This year, on the agenda is China's growing military strength and Russia's recent military build-up near Ukraine.
We are meeting at a pivotal time for our alliance, a time of growing geopolitical competition, regional instability, terrorism, cyber attacks and climate change. No nation and no continent can deal with these challenges alone. But Europe and North America are not alone. We stand together in NATO. The countries around this table are 30 of the world's strongest democracies, representing almost 1 billion people, half of the world's economic power, and more than half of the world's military strength. When we stand together, we can overcome any threat to our security. Today, we will open a new chapter in transatlantic relations by agreeing NATO 2030, a transatlantic agenda for the future.
Furthermore, the fact that we can meet in person...
NATO is a powerful political and military alliance between 30 European and North American countries. US President Joe Biden, in his first meeting with the alliance, which his predecessor Donald Trump ridiculed and belittled, urged his fellow NATO leaders to stand up to China's authoritarianism and growing military might, a change of focus for an alliance created to defend Europe from the Soviet Union during the Cold War. NATO has become increasingly concerned about the growing military capabilities of China, which it sees as a threat to the security and democratic values of its members. In recent years, the alliance has also grown wary of China's activities in Africa, where it has set up army bases.
China's growing influence and international policies present challenges to alliance security.
At the end of the meeting, the leaders designated China as presenting systemic challenges in a summit communiqué taking a forceful stance towards Beijing.
At the summit today, we addressed China. There is strong convergence of views among allies. Based on our interests, we see opportunities to engage on issues such as arms control and climate change. But China's growing influence and international policies present challenges to alliance security. Leaders agreed that we need to address such challenges together as an alliance, and that we need to engage with China to defend our security interests. We are concerned by China's coercive policies, which stand in contrast to the fundamental values enshrined in the Washington Treaty. China is rapidly expanding its nuclear arsenal with more warheads and a larger number of sophisticated delivery systems.
The language in the summit's final communiqué, which will now set the path for alliance policy, came a day after the Group of Seven issued a statement on human rights in China and Taiwan that Beijing said slandered its reputation. G7 nations had scolded China over human rights in its Xinjiang region, called for Hong Kong to keep a high degree of autonomy, and demanded a full investigation of the origins of the coronavirus in China.
I think we're in a contest, not with China per se, but a context with autocratic governments around the world, as whether or not democracies can compete with them in the rapidly changing 21st century. And I think how we act and whether we pull together as democracies is going to determine whether our grandkids look back 15 years from now and say, did they step up? Are democracies as relevant and as powerful as they have been?
I think in our conversations, we recognize that there are issues in which we will have to engage with China. Climate change being a perfect example. We cannot keep the world to less than 1.5 degrees of warming unless China is part of the conversation and indeed the solution. But in many other areas, on the economy, on trade, we will find ourselves in a competitive position with China. We will compete with them. And still in a third area, there will be a need to contest China, particularly in the matters of human rights. And that's where all of us, as a G7 and partners, are aligned in ensuring that we are consistent and united in our approach on these issues.
The G7 group, made up of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the UK and the US, also unveiled a significant infrastructure initiative for lower-income countries in a bid to counter China's multi-trillion-dollar Belt and Road Initiative.
While Beijing didn't take kindly to any of this, especially NATO's communique designating it as a security risk. Reacting to the statements, China accuses NATO of slandering its peaceful development and representing a continuation of the Cold War mentality and bloc politics.
Following the release of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization's communique warning that China presents systemic challenges to international order and security, the Chinese mission to the European Union has accused NATO of slander on China's peaceful development. On Monday, at a summit in Brussels, leaders from the Transatlantic Security Alliance, with Joe Biden in attendance for the first time, took a forceful stance towards Beijing. It's the first ever significant mention of China in a NATO summit declaration. China says the statement represents a continuation of the Cold War mentality and blames the US of targeting it.
The
US is trying to draw ideological lines to form small groups targeting China. But the US and the EU have different interests. The EU is an independent body. Just now, you mentioned the relevant EU countries. They will not tie themselves to the anti-China war chariot of the United States. We will resolutely safeguard our sovereignty, security, and development interests.
The Chinese spokesperson also says when it comes to nuclear power, the number of Chinese nuclear weapons is by no means in the same league with NATO member states such as the United States. He adds that China is committed to a defense policy that is defensive in nature, and its pursuit of defense and military modernization is justified, reasonable, open and transparent. And on the statement released by leaders at the G7 summit last weekend, in which they criticized Beijing over a range of human rights issues, China accuses the group of political manipulation.
We have noticed that the joint communique of the G7 summit mentioned issues involving China and interfered in China's internal affairs. The act has seriously violated the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, which runs contrary to the trend of the times for peace, development, cooperation and mutual benefits, exposing the evil intentions of the United States and a few other countries to artificially create antagonism and estrangement and widen differences and contradictions.
In a joint statement at the end of the three-day summit, leaders of the G7 countries had urged China to respect human rights and fundamental freedoms. Issues highlighted included abuses against the Uyghur Muslim minority group and the crackdown on Hong Kong pro-democracy activists.
Also on the front burner this week was the US President Joe Biden meeting Russian President Vladimir Putin face-to-face in Geneva. Tensions have been high on a number of issues between both countries, from alleged Russian cyber attacks to Russia's role in Ukraine. Well, here's how their first meeting since Joe Biden became president went.
In the highly anticipated meeting, President Joe Biden and President Vladimir Putin met for talks in Geneva to see if they can find some common ground. The US and Russian leaders shook hands for the cameras and posed for a photo opportunity before going behind closed doors for talks. It was the first meeting between the pair since Biden took office in January and lasted for several hours. The two leaders held about 4 hours of talks, covering a range of topics, including nuclear arms control and US allegations of Russian cyber attacks.
President Putin and I had share a unique responsibility to manage the relationship between two powerful and proud countries. A relationship that has to be stable and predictable, and we should be able to cooperate where it's in our mutual interest. And where we have differences, I want President Putin to understand why I say what I say and why I do what I do, and how we'll respond to specific kinds of actions that harm America's interest. Now, I told President Putin my agenda is not against Russia or anyone else. It's for the American people. Fighting COVID-19, rebuilding our economy, reestablishing relationships around the world with our allies and friends, and protecting the American people. That's my responsibility as president.
After the summit, President Putin praised his US counterpart Joe Biden, saying he found constructive and well-balanced.
Конечно, в принципиальном ключе у нас по многим позициям.
I believe that there was no hostility. On the contrary, our meeting, of course, took place in a principled manner. Our assessments on many points differ. But, in my opinion, both sides demonstrated a desire to understand each other and look for ways to bring their positions closer. The conversation was very constructive.
Кибербезопасности.
Singing a similar tune, President Joe Biden described the talks as positive, but warned the U.S. will not tolerate interference in U.S. democracy.
I made it clear to President Putin that we'll continue to raise issues of fundamental human rights, because that's what we are. That's who we are. The idea is we hold these truths self-evident, that all men and women, we haven't lived up to it completely, but we've always widened the arc of commitment and included more and more people. And I raised the case of two wrongfully imprisoned American citizens, Paul Whelan and Trevor Reed. I also raised the ability of Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty to operate and the importance of a free press and freedom of speech. I made it clear that we will not tolerate attempts to violate our democratic sovereignty or destabilize our democratic elections, and we would respond. The bottom line is, I told President Putin that we need to have some basic rules of the road that we can all abide by.
The US and Russia released a joint statement following the summit between the two countries. The two leaders noting that even in periods of tension, the two nations share goals of ensuring predictability in the strategic sphere, reducing the risk of armed conflict and the threat of nuclear war. Both leaders also agreed to hold further talks on arms control and cybersecurity and to return their respective ambassadors to their posts after they were withdrawn earlier this year.
It's the end of an era. Israelis say goodbye to Benjamin Netanyahu as they welcome their new Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett. That's in a moment. Please stay with us. You're still watching Foreign Dispatches on Channels Television. The first Israeli government in 12 years not led by Benjamin Netanyahu got down to business on Monday. The right-wing leader's record run in office ended last weekend, with parliament approving by a razor-thin majority of 60 to 59 a new administration led by Naftali Bennett, a nationalist whose views mirror Netanyahu's on many ways. Let's take a look at how Israelis are welcoming their new prime minister.
In Jerusalem, many Israelis welcomed the new government under Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, who leads the ultra-nationalist Yamina party. Under the coalition deal, Bennett will serve as Prime Minister for 2 years until he is replaced by Yair Lapid, who leads the centrist Yesh Atid party.
Yes, I'm here celebrating the end of an era here in Israel, saying goodbye to our Prime Minister and celebrate our new 2 Prime Ministers, Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid. And we want them to succeed and to unite us again and to be the country we want everybody feel welcome and accepted.
We are so excited. We are close to get heart attacks from excitement, from happiness. And the punchline is that he wanted to separate between us. But thanks to him, we got together, everything against him, because we understood the danger of him to continue to control our democracy as a dictatorship.
Instead of the traditional toast marking Bennett's entry into the Prime Minister's office, veteran leader Benjamin Netanyahu held a low-key meeting with the former defense chief who heads the nationalist Yamina party to brief him on government business.
We are at the beginning of new days. The hardships, not an exaggerated word in this case, of forming a unity government are behind us. And now the citizens of Israel, all of them are looking up to us, and we must deliver. We will act together in partnership and responsibility to heal the rift, amid the people, and immediately bring the country back to functionality, regular functioning after a long period of paralysis and strife. We're looking ahead.
Minutes after, Netanyahu repeated a pledge to topple the new government approved on Sunday by a 60-59 vote in parliament.
Stands that from today, there will be...
I stand here as an elected emissary for the public, for over 1 million Israelis who voted for the Likud under my leadership, and some million more citizens who voted for right-wing parties, knowing that they will be a part of governments that I'm heading. Thanks to them, and for them, I intend to continue fulfilling the great mission of my life to ensure the State of Israel's existence, security, and prosperity.
No less important.
Formation of the alliance of right-wing, centrist, left-wing and Arab parties with little in common other than a desire to unseat Netanyahu capped coalition-building efforts after a March 23rd election, Israel's 4th poll in 2 years. Under the coalition deal, Bennett, a 49-year-old Orthodox Jew and tech millionaire who advocates annexing parts of the West Bank, will be replaced as Prime Minister in 2023 by centrist Yair Lapid, a former television host. Lapid, widely regarded as the architect of the coalition that brought down Netanyahu, is for now foreign minister.
The 16th of June every year is a day set aside in the international calendar to celebrate the African child. This year's theme is accelerating implementation of Agenda 2040 for an Africa fit for children. To celebrate this day, we spoke to a young African girl who had a message for African leaders. Here's what she had to say.
I've also wanted to travel, go to Paris, because Paris is the most country that I know that it's got interest in art. I can find a lot of things in Paris that I can draw, and there are a lot of singers there overseas. So that my wish when I grow up and finish school is that I can go overseas and pursue my dreams.
12-year-old Wandile Mpamaga is in grade 7, and like many other African children, she has dreams and aspirations which she hopes will come to fruition against any odds. Wandile likes to draw, and she's been doing so since she was much smaller. She's become a little celebrity to her peers. Recently, she discovered a love for singing.
Baby, I was dancing in the dark with you between my arms.
Wandile is very, very passionate at what she does. She puts so much effort into it. She's a good drawer, and I wish one day to be her manager.
The first time I realized this, she had actually good drawings. Then I could see talent in her.
Wandile's proud mother, Sharon Masugu, is holding thumbs for her daughter who dreams of studying art in France and becoming an internationally acclaimed artist. She describes elements that influence Wandile's work.
She was very young. She would play around with the papers, pencils, then anything that comes in her mind, she used to draw. But as she grew up, she started, when she's angry, she removes her frustration on the drawings. When she's happy, she also does the same.
Children, a natural way for children to express what they're thinking and feeling is usually through art. Smaller children express that through play.
It's quite a challenge being an African child in Africa today, given all the socio-political and economic developments on the continent. Wandile's dreams are among the millions of many African children who face many hurdles children shouldn't face daily. To remove these hurdles between them and their dreams, Wandile makes a passionate plea to African leaders.
If I were to meet one African leader, I would ask them to grant us free education, because I believe that education is the key to everything. Especially with my art, I feel like if I don't get education, there's nothing that I can do in life.
The Day of the African Child was initiated by the Organization of African Unity, OAU, now the African Union, and it honors those who participated in the Soweto Students' Uprising in 1976 in South Africa over rights to learn in their language of choice instead of being forced to learn in Afrikaans, which they considered to be their oppressor's language.
And finally on the program, from the young to the elderly, let's meet 82-year-old Granny Anya, who helps a local community in Russia by tidying the yard and cleaning up stairwells. And guess what? She does it all while dancing. Take a look.
Meet Granny Anya, the 82-year-old who likes to dance through her daily chores to the beat of Soviet songs and melodies from Indian movies as she helps the local community tidy up the yard and stairwells.
She's doing well by cleaning around. I don't know when she sleeps. I woke up in the morning to take out the trash, and she was already there, cutting grass. She cleans up for everyone, whether you ask her or not. She helps everybody.
To help her get through the day and its many chores, Berdnikova draws inspiration from music. In particular, she prefers Soviet songs as well as tender melodies from old Indian movies. She says she can't help but dance when hearing one. She's become a local celebrity.
I collect whatever is lying somewhere and take it right to the trash bin. I've cut the tree branches there and I sweep there. I keep an eye so that everything there is clean. Some people give me 100 rubles. Some give 50 for keeping it clean.
Born in 1939, Berdnikova had been working since 16 on various jobs. Granny Anya says she accepts little donations for the work done, as people give her small amounts of money to thank her. The cash she receives, along with her pension, covers her modest needs. But ultimately, she says she just enjoys dancing.
Well, this is where we say goodbye till next time. Remember, our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you so much for watching the program. I'm Tenyola Shobowale. Stay safe.